Today we're going to talk about the Apostle Paul. When we talk about the Apostle Paul, we talk about all of the good that he did, the books of the New Testament that he wrote, the preachings that he did, the churches that he planted, his ministry. But why is it that we are never tempted in looking at the bad that he did in his life? Because how he started out in life was very, very bad. On the wrong foot for sure. But how he finished up his life was polar opposite. Very, very good. Because he was once an executioner. He was an executioner of lots of wrongful convictions. He brought terror, hard life, to lots of families, Christian families, who were impacted by these wrongful convictions. And so why is it that today we're not ever tempted of it's hard for us to let go of his bad and embrace his good? Well, it's probably because we didn't live during his time period. We weren't affected by his evil actions. We weren't one of those families of the wrongful convictions in which we used to be married and now our husband has been killed by the government. We're now a single mom. We've got to put food on the table for ourselves and for our children. There is one less at the dinner table now because of Paul. Well, from Paul to get from doing some very horrible acts to very good acts, there was a change. And that change is what we're going to look at in today's devotional. We're going to look at Acts chapter 9, verses 1 through 31. Acts chapter 9, verses 1 through 31. This is when Paul became a follower of Christ. Yes, this executioner, this person who hated followers of Christ, and now he is one of them. He is now beginning his life, his new life, as a Christian. And the beginning of his new life was he was now disabled. He was blind. This happened not in his hometown, but in another town, the town of Damascus. He is staying over. He is a guest at Judas's house. Now, Judas is not Judas Iscariot or any other Judas. This is just Judas. And he is a guest in Judas's house, and he cannot see. He's going through trauma. And this is the beginning of his new life as a Christian. And the way he responds to this trauma is truly amazing. He is praying to God. He is not bitter towards God. He is reacting in a very amazing way. The things that he could do very easily now, like walking by himself, like being able to feed himself, being able to do basic things, he is having to relearn. He is having to learn how to do that like he once did as a kid. And so one morning, there's this guy who lives in Damascus. His name is Ananias, and he is a disciple of Jesus. He's not one of the first 12, but he is a follower of Jesus, and he wakes up, starts his day, and he starts his day with God. He starts his day thinking right, and he is with God doing his morning devotional, okay? And God tells Ananias, I've got a to-do list for you today. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to provide a solution to someone's problems today. This particular man, his name is Paul, and he is blind. and I want you to restore his sight. He is over here in Judas's house. He's a guest at Judas's house, and I want you to go to his house, and I want you to provide a solution to Paul's problems. Well, Ananias is telling God, are you right about this, God? Because Paul, he is the one that we don't like. He has brought terror in a lot of people's lives. He was an executioner in a lot of wrongful convictions. And God tells Ananias that what he sees that he did, he sees that it's wrong now. He is not the same person. And so Ananias goes over there and he provides a solution to Paul's problem. When we look at a situation like this, and when I think about Ananias doing that courageous act, because I don't think we need to brush over this. I don't think we need to think this is no big deal, because this was a courageous act that Ananias did. We need to look at this situation as like what David did to Goliath. David's courageous acts on the battlefield Ananias was modeling this for us in a morning devotional. And this courageous act that he was supposed to do that day was very courageous, because battling the thought of, okay, this guy who is blind now, I'm going to keep him blind because I'm not going to provide a solution to his problem, because, he could be a spy and, trying to debunk Christianity even more. And this could be he could all be playing us. And with him not being able to see, then him going back to be an executioner will be really hard for him. He would not be able to kill any more innocent people. And the family members of these wrongful convictions, what are you doing, Ananias, what are you doing? This guy, right? That's how courageous this act was for Ananias to do this. And for Ananias to do this, he was actually able to see the positive consequences from his obedient acts that one morning of starting his day off right with God, thinking right, doing his to-do list, because this courageous act brought on such positivity, not only for Paul that day, bringing a solution to Paul's problems, but Paul had a tremendous ministry, started a lot of churches, propagating the gospel of Christ, in which this brought a lot of solutions to a lot of other people's problems. So you better believe it. Ananias was able to look back on his life that day and say, wow, I'm glad I took that courageous act, because look at these positive consequences that came from that day. When we look at a situation in the Bible, we always want to look at other similar situations in the Bible, and we want to compare and contrast them, right? Because we want to get more meaning from what we're gleaning from in this devotional. And so when I think about the courageous acts of Ananias that day, it makes me think of one that happened in the Old Testament, Jonah. Jonah woke up one morning and having his morning devotional, and God gives him a to-do list. He says, Jonah, I want you to go provide a solution to the Ninevites, a solution to their everyday problems. And the Ninevites were enemies of the Israelites, just like Paul was enemies of the Christians. And even though Jonah had delayed disobedience, where Ananias did not have delayed disobedience, I don't want us to concentrate on the differences between these two men, but I want us to concentrate on the similarities between these two men. So let's look at two similarities between Ananias and Jonah. The first similarity is both Ananias and Jonah didn't have any doubts they were hearing from God. Neither one of them said, when they were doing their morning devotional, getting their day started off on the right foot, thinking right, neither one of them said, after they got their to-do list, is this really you, God? Because we can either hear from God or Satan, right? Our thoughts either originate from him or from the enemy. And so neither one of them questioned if that was coming from God. And so what does this tell us today? Well, on my YouTube channel, I'm all about learning more about how to get the spiritual thinking mind ticking, okay? Because it is not a common sense type of thinking, okay? We have learned so much so far about our spiritual thinking mindset. And I'm going to put on the screen what we've learned so far. So far, we have learned that it helps us make unconventional decisions, which in essence blesses us and it blesses others. Now we see right now in this devotional, Paul and Ananias and Jonah are both making unconventional decisions. I mean, providing a solution to their enemy's problems, right? I mean, unconventional. And we saw this with the Zarephath widow. You know, the Zarephath widow, this devotional is found in devotional 78, and she does the same thing. And so, you know, making unconventional decisions, you know, our relationship with our Heavenly Father, every bit of it is based on faith. We are believing that that heaven exists, that we are going to be with him in heaven after we die. But we not only have faith in our futures, but we have faith in decisions that we make today while we are living, right? And that's what we've learned so far. How to make unconventional decisions. We've also learned that our spiritual thinking mindset helps us see invisible victims. Now, what do I mean by invisible victims? These are people who are not seen by others, by the masses, as victims, okay? So, for instance, in our last devotional 79, we learned that Stephen was an invisible victim, okay? He was an innocent man on death row. And if he was a visible victim, he would never be in the situation that he was in, right? So he was an invisible victim. So, and this is what Paul sees after he's converted. He sees that, man, Stephen was truly innocent. And all of these other wrongful convictions that he was an executioner of, these were truly innocent people. And so he begins to see them as God sees them. And so as we build in our spiritual thinking mindset, we're going to see invisible victims. Our spiritual thinking mindset helps us to see tools to fight impossible situations. We've learned so far in devotional 76 of how to fight the loss of a reputation. We've learned how to battle survivor's guilt if you've encountered true crime involving that in devotional 70. We've learned how to battle, you know, thinking, is God not fair, in devotional 69. We've also learned that our spiritual thinking mindset helps us to detect deception. We get to see how God sees others through using these ways to detect deception. So others that would be viewed by public opinion as innocent they are truly dangerous. Okay? And we learned this from the false prophet from Bethel in Devotional 72. So why am I recapping everything regarding our spiritual thinking mindset? Well, because all of this helps us in how to hear from God. Staying stuck in those thoughts of shame, those thoughts of jealousy, those thoughts of God being unfair, those thoughts of anger, denial, self-pity, sadness, those thoughts are from Satan. They're not from God. And so this leads us into the second thing that Jonah and Ananias had in common. Both men were not going through hard times in their lives. We tend to want to hear from God when we're going through a dire situation. So it could be a situation where we're going through a valley right now, a very dark time in our life, or it could be a situation in which we're faced with a major decision in our life. What do we need to do? Do we need to do choice A or do we need to do choice B? And when we're not in either situation, in a dire situation, and we're on a mountaintop, we have a tendency to not to want to hear from God because everything is going right in our lives, right? I mean, why do we even need to hear from God? Things are going right. That can be a temptation. And so we need to be reminded that the reason we're enjoying this particular mountaintop in our life is because of God, not because of us. And so neither one of these men are going through a hard time in their life, and they are waking up that morning, having their devotional, getting their mind started off on the right foot that day, getting their to-do list, and doing their to-do list. So what does this tell us about our spiritual thinking mindset? Well, it tells us, it lets us see the silver lining in the trials that we're going through. The silver lining is that we are in a desperate state in which we want to hear from God. We want to keep that line of communication open. And we don't have to battling with prideful thoughts, thinking that, why do we even need God, right? And so we're already in a desperate situation, and this really gives us a yearning to cling to his scriptures like never before. And so let's look to Ananias and Jonah as models of how to get our days started off on the right foot, thinking right, getting in his word, learning more about this spiritual thinking mindset, praying and looking for answers to our prayers all throughout our day. Because as we grow in this spiritual thinking mindset, we are going to be hearing from God, and we are going to be able to look at present day Pauls, not for what they used to do, but what they're doing now in their lives. That's my spiritual food for you to munch on the rest of the week. I can't wait to see you next time.